What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Joe, JHOvercomes, America's friendliest cop, and welcome to the JHOvercomes podcast, where we talk about overcoming adversity each and every podcast. Hey, listen, I want to thank you guys so much for all the love that you guys have given the JHOvercomes podcast thus far. We're only on episode number 3, and it feels like episode number 300 from all the love that we've been receiving. So we want to thank you for that. Thank you so much. We've had 2 incredible guests. And today we're not going to disappoint. Okay, we're just going to continue with the ball rolling. Today's speaker is a phenomenal woman, and after meeting her, a little bit probably over a year ago, slightly over a year ago, I've had the opportunity to get a chance to speak with her. And when I tell you that she is the epitome of overcoming, today when we get into her story, I promise you that we are going to, we're going to find some different ways that she can share with us, okay, on ways that you can overcome in your situations. And as always, a lot of things that we talk about, it's not, you guys know my past as a police officer, but we don't just speak to police officers. We don't speak to just first responders. We speak to everyone here because, we this is about life, okay, overcoming situations in life. And whatever story we bring before you, whatever podcast we display, what we come across with, it's always going to be about something that can help you overcome adversity and understand just how blessed we really are. So without any further ado, this next speaker, she's a life coach. Okay, she is also a professional speaker. She has her own site. She has her own podcast. And I promise you this: once you hear her story, okay, once you hear her story about overcoming, it will inspire you to realize that you can overcome too. Okay, I promise you that. So without any further ado, I'm help me please welcome Miss Ruqayya Gibson. Miss Ruqayya Gibson. All right.
Thank you so much for having me, Joe. It's my pleasure and honor to be here.
Listen, the pleasure is all mine. The pleasure is all mine. Ricardo, before we get started, okay, I like to do this in the beginning. I like to do it in the end. Um, you're a speaker. Okay, you have your own podcast. You have your own foundations. You have your own YouTube page. Tell the people where they can find you, just in case they want to pause this and come back later and they don't get a chance to get to the information that you have to give out early in the show.
All right. So on YouTube, my page is really everything is simple. It's my name, Ruqayya Gibson. So my YouTube channel is Ruqayya Gibson. On Twitter, it's Ruqayya Gibson. Instagram is Ruqayya Gibson, but also I have a page for my foundation, which is Do It for Damani. Damani is my son, and so it's Do It for Damani, and our website is also doitfordamani.com. My heart just skipped a beat seeing him on the screen. It's my pride and joy, my blessing, and yeah, just I get speechless when I see him. I thought I knew what love was, and loving someone whose heart was so pure, a kid that was just so perfect. And everybody says their child is perfect, but he was perfect for me. He was my angel, and I keep him in my heart every moment of every day. And I miss him. I never knew how much love could hurt, but also how much love could push you forward.
Mm, mm. And why don't you and again, a lot of people don't know your story, and I hope to be able to get your story out to as many people as possible today. And I know that from the first time I spoke with you and hearing about what happened to your son, I was heartbroken. Okay, I was heartbroken, broken, and it was just something that was for you sudden and unexpected. And it's not that, oftentimes in life when we have these sudden incidents come upon us, um, it's sometimes it's more damaging as something that we've expected in life, but it's never easy no matter what the situation is. But when one minute we're living a perfect life, and then the next minute we just get struck by tragedy, this is something that we've all experienced. And today, I want to talk to you about what happened to Damani, and how it was so sudden and how it was so tragic for you and the rest of your family.
Yeah, it was sudden. It was unexpected to be happy and laughing and smiling in one moment. Actually, the day that it happened, I was at track practice because I've been a coach for most of my adult life. So I was at track practice. He went to track practice that morning and had a great practice. He had a great practice. And He called me. I talked to him twice, and then the third time he called me because he was always calling me. That was my buddy. And I work. I have a job, and my husband is in real estate, and is at home. And I would always ask Damani, I was like, why are you always calling me when your daddy at home? When your daddy, is free, but you're calling me, I'm in class, or I'm with the team. And now I look back and I'm just so grateful that he did that, that I was his person, that I was the one that he called. So he called me to ask if he can go to the rodeo. We're in Houston, we're in Texas, and it was rodeo time because it was March, it was spring break. And, I texted him back and I was like, well, who are you going with? And it was just an average, everyday conversation. He decided not to go just because he didn't want to pay, for parking or for Uber, whatever it was. And that was the last communication I had with him. And I actually did a talk about it because it hurts me sometimes because, like I said, he called me that last time. That third call was a call. And I texted him back. And I did a speech called Answer the Call. In life, we have to answer the call. And we take for granted that we're going to, I took for granted. I was like, okay, let me finish up practice. I'm going to text him back. I still responded. But that was my last opportunity to hear his voice. And I missed that last opportunity. And for a period of time, I started asking, your mind will mess with you when you have, something unexpected like that happen and you start looking at every little thing that you could have done differently. And I convinced myself that I would have heard something in his voice, even though it was probably 20 minutes after the last time I talked to him. I convinced myself I would have heard something if I had answered the phone and that I could have prevented it. Also, I stayed after practice talking to someone because, we talk about adversity a lot. And that's the kind of person I've always been, is to help people with their adversity. So I stayed after practice and talked to a young lady on my team who was struggling with something going on in her life. And I felt horrible when I got home and I had just missed my son. And for a while, I rebelled. I swore that I would never use my voice for good again. I never would do those things to help people again because I felt that in my attempt or my constant need to help others that I missed helping my own child. But I realized that that isn't really what happened. That's just those stages of grief. And it's not really the 5 stages that we hear about all the time. There are some other ones, especially when it comes to like losing your child. I went through periods where I just did not see how I could live. I honestly did not believe that I could survive this. I did not, at first it was not suicidal thoughts. It was just me not thinking that my body could survive this. And I would wake up surprised and angry. I woke up angry so many mornings in the beginning that I woke up that God did not allow me to join my child. But he was completely happy and healthy and laughing and talking. We had just come back from a little family trip, a short trip, because it was spring break. So we went to Austin. We go every spring break. We went to Austin and stayed at a little resort that we've stayed at many times. And he was fine. He was fine. And we got home. He went to practice the next morning. Like I said, I went to practice. And when I came home from practice, the television was on. And I, looked for him and his brother. And I had just missed him. He had just left. And he went to Whataburger to get lunch. And in the car, on the way to Whataburger, he suddenly stopped breathing. He suddenly just collapsed. But when you're sitting down in the car, it doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't look like a collapse. And what it looked like to his friend who was driving the car, it looked like he had fallen asleep. And so they weren't alarmed. They weren't thinking that it was an urgent situation because you just came home from practice with this guy. This kid has been healthy. He's been happy. He's been laughing. Actually, right before he appeared to fall asleep, he was on the phone with another friend. And they were talking about the rodeo and why they weren't going to the rodeo. And I called that person because it was the last number in his phone because I wanted answers. And they said he sounded normal. He was laughing and joking. And with no warning. 1 minute, 1 second, smiling, talking, laughing. The next second, just gone. And like I said, they weren't alarmed. So they didn't know that he could have died. That was the furthest thing from their mind.
Sure.
So when they couldn't wake him up, or when he didn't wake up, they drove back home where I was, because I was home now. I had just missed him when he left. And they still weren't alarmed. They came and got me and said, something's come outside, something's not right, but they were calm. And I walked outside. And when I saw my baby, he looked like he was sleeping. He looked like he was sleeping. So my first thing was I just called his name and said, Damani, get up. And he couldn't get up. And so I'm trained in CPR because I've been a coach, like I said, for almost, I was in a high school system for 10 years, but I've been coaching for almost 20 years.
Sure.
So I pull him out the car and I lay him in the street and I start CPR compressions on my baby. And I'm just screaming and I'm yelling. I'm calling his name and I'm begging him to stay with me. I'm begging him. And I'm begging God. I'm begging God to let him live, because he was a good kid. And I struggled with that for a long time. Like, he was a good person. And I thought that I was trying my best to be a good person, but he was a better person than me. When I look back, I don't even know how I deserved to be his mother, how I deserved somebody so beautiful and so special, so giving and so loving. But I didn't think that I deserved this. I didn't think he deserved this, because I teach and I coach, and I know kids that have trouble and are robbing people and doing drugs. And I did my best to make sure that my son never got caught up in any of that. He knew not to do drugs or go and put himself in certain situations. I thought I covered all the bases. I told him, don't text and drive. As a parent, you think that if you talk about these things, then that we know that a kid can die, but not just for no reason. We think that it's going to be, they made a mistake, they were in the wrong place at the wrong time, but it was none of that. And my baby was gone. But one thing I never did, I never got mad at God. I never got mad at God. And we did a candle lighting that his friends organized right after it happened. And I remember I hadn't thought about it, but I said it to them because everybody was distraught. I was distraught. But I said, he wasn't ours. He was God's child. God gave him to us.
Yeah. Okay, that's if we can just go back a little. So when you first saw Damani, he looked as if he was sleeping, and it's the furthest thing from his friend's mind. It's the furthest thing from anybody's mind that he suddenly lost his life. And was that the first time that you ever gave CPR?
That thought came in my mind while I was doing it. The words, literally, oh my God, this is the first time you're doing CPR and it's on your own child.
Yeah. Yeah.
And training for it and doing it are two completely different things.
Yeah, that was my next the next question was, next statement was, having done it, it's so different when you have to perform it and opposed to training. In training, we go through the class, we have laughs in the class, we joke in the class, not thinking that it's ever going to be something that we use, especially on one of our own, and double especially on one of our children. And the the thoughts that you felt when it came down to you thought that you covered all the bases. You thought that you did everything right. Um, I mean, you did everything right. You did cover all the bases. You did, do everything you possibly could, to prevent anything from happening to your child. We like to all think that we do. But when something like this happens, something that you just got finished saying was you never got mad at God. And at that point, I mean, we know as spiritual people that God understands if we do get mad at him, correct? I've heard several times where people have said, yeah, I was angry with God, and God understood. It's almost like, just like our parents. We've gotten mad at our parents before, right? So how many questions did you have after that? What kind of questions did you have for God at that moment?
Why my son died? Why didn't you give me a warning? Why didn't you save him? Why didn't you let him get revived? Why didn't you make the doctors try harder? Why wouldn't the doctors listen to my cries for them to connect him to life support? Why would this happen to my child? Why? And what am I supposed to do with this now? How am I supposed to survive this? Why are you leaving me here? Why do I have to live if you took my baby? Why? But then the why turned into what?
Mm,
And that's what saved me. I stopped asking why and I started asking what. What can I do now? What do you want me to do with this pain that you've given me? Because you gave me this pain. Like if we believe what is said in the word, regardless of what people believe, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Jewish, I've been like, because after this, I dove in so deep. I wanted to just, I wanted to know why God allows this kind of suffering, right? Because I'm not the only one. So first, the first thing that saved me was changing it from why me to why anyone. That was the first question, that shift, where the shift came, because I felt my pain, and I've always been a person who had such a deep love for other people that I said, if I'm feeling like this, all of these parents have felt that have lost a child, have felt this pain. Why is this necessary? Why do any children have to die? Why do any children have to leave this earth before their parents? And then after that question, after I started exploring that, and so when I started diving deeper into God's word, I would look at what the prophets have gone through, look at what Jesus has gone through, look at what Mary went through, So I'm not the only one suffering. And when we look at the people who've been closest to God, they honestly have suffered more. So this suffering isn't something that should pull me away from God. It's something that could pull me closer to God. So yes, while I never got mad at God, angry, I was mad that this happened to me. I was mad that God allowed it to me, and I lamented to God, right? Just like Job, just like, many of the prophets, like, God, where have you been? Where are you in my time of need, right? That's in the Psalms, all throughout the Psalms. You've left me alone. But then in the next moment, we always realize, and it's a voice, whether it's inside of us, I'm right here. I've never left you. I'm with you. And when I think about my son, I think about the fact that when the word says that to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, then I say, well, if God is with me and my son is present with the Lord, then my son is with me as well.
Amen. Amen. And that's pretty crystal clear to you now, having gone through that and having gone through those stages of understanding the whys. Okay, and then it turned into the whats, and then now you have this situation where you can either take that and bottle it up and keep it to yourself, right? Or you can do like you've been doing and sharing your story to help other people, sharing your story so that other people can realize that this is something that you can overcome. It's not going to be easy because I'm sure it's still not easy for you. Um,
Right.
it, it's something that you're going to constantly go through. It's a constant battle. But
Let me say this. I never understood why though. I just want people to understand that. And I think about the prayer, or, what we say is like, lean not on your own understanding, right? Or give me peace that surpasses understanding. And what I realize now, I thought I understood that prayer before, But what I realized is that I never will. My human mind will never understand why my son had to go. I will never. And when I would pray, I kept praying and praying. And even if a thought would come as if it was an answer, that answer wasn't good enough. And so I realized no answer to the question why was ever going to bring me peace. So I stopped. I still ask why, but I have to always, when that comes up, because that's a natural human response, I just let myself know, just be at peace. Just seek peace. I'm not going to understand why on this side of life. When I leave, when I'm, called back home to God, then I'll be able to ask him those questions and hopefully understand if it even still matters to me at that time, right? But right now, I don't understand why. But like you said, it would be me not fulfilling my purpose to keep this to myself, because the answer to what was given, the answer to why wasn't. So what do you want me to do with this? Is share my story, is to, and I remember I talked to Inky when we were in Atlanta that time at the speaker conference, and I talked to him. He told me, now go and tell someone else. Like, you've learned something deep through your experience. Now go and teach someone else. And that's what I feel my purpose is, and when I look back, it's always been my purpose. When I look at, like, how Facebook gives you the reminders of things that you've said in the past, or you look and you see an old video of you speaking. Literally 3 weeks before my son passed away, I gave a speech about how I was talking to coaches. Children are not guaranteed to live forever. We're not guaranteed 4 years with our kids. And that if any moment, something that we didn't do in that moment could have changed that child's life. So we have to pour into them. And I'm saying this 3 weeks before I lose my own child. And if you watch the video now, you'll think that it's a speech I'm giving because I lost my child. I can show you that, yeah, I might have a bad day, because it's not like I don't still have bad days. I still have bad days, and I still have to push my way through it, because I'm not giving a testimony, I'm living a testimony.
And this is exactly why you're here today, on this show, is so we can show people that you can overcome the most horrendous thing that has ever happened to you in your life. Okay, because if it's fair for me to say, I can say that this is the most horrendous thing that's ever happened to you in your life, correct? So,
Ever.
right.
Yeah.
So it's every parent's worst nightmare. Okay, and you've lived it and you've walked in it, and now what you're doing is you're passing that story up along to help people, and that is where the purpose comes in, is when we use our stories. Okay, everything that has happened to us in the past, whether it's been sickness, whether it's been the loss of a loved one, whether it's been financial difficulties, whether it's been health issues, it's not even for us, it's for someone else, far greater, far down the line that we can see. And I want to thank you seriously for walking in that and being able to share that, because you could have easily just bottled up and taken it and just kept it to yourself.
I
But instead,
wanted to.
right.
I wanted to for a long time,
would have
and
been
I did for a
justified in
long time.
sure. You would have been justified in doing so. Nobody would have blamed you for it.
Yeah,
But you didn't. You
yeah.
didn't. You're using it to help thousands. Okay, which is going to lead into millions. I promise you that. And that is what this whole thing is about. And this is what makes you a true overcomer, and just worthy of God's blessings. Truly, truly, truly.
I want
So
to say something about overcome, because when you sent me the message and you said something about how you've overcome it, and I was like, let me think about that, because I feel like I'm still striving to overcome it. And then it hit me. I said, but you know what? The fact that I'm able to move through this means that, like, sometimes we think of it, like some people might say, someone listening to this, and they're like, well, my situation, I'm never going to overcome it, right? But can you overcome being paralyzed by it? And that's what I've overcome. I've overcome being paralyzed by it to where I couldn't move. I've overcome not wanting to live anymore, not seeing any purpose for myself anymore. So I've overcome that. Will I ever truly overcome losing him? I'm constantly overcoming it. I'm allowing myself to work on overcoming it. I'm working on healing from it, but I don't think that we ever truly 100% are healed. That scar is there, the scab, it gets irritated, it itches, Like I have a scab here, actually. It's a scar here. When I was giving him CPR, I had to keep adjusting his head, right, to open the airway.
Sure.
And a scar appeared here on my hand. And so now every time I look there on my hand, it's a reminder of that moment, you know, but I'm constantly healing. I'm constantly working on overcoming and making the choice to continue each day. I think about how people go to, what is it, Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, and like they have to every day. Like if they stop working on their process any day, then they have a relapse possibly. And grief and tragedy, adversity can be the same thing, same way. We think that, okay, I've worked on myself and I'm in a good place. So then you stop doing the things that you did to get to the good place. And then all of a sudden you see yourself sinking back into that dark hole and you're wondering why. But it's like a daily dose, it's vitamins. And I've gone through that because I went through the period of doing well. And then this quarantine happened, right? I was getting out and I was doing things and I was keeping myself busy and I was meditating and doing yoga and serving, because serving others is another thing that's helped me as well. And then when I came in the house and I'm sitting here for weeks at a time, and you know, you talk about the sun coming up sometimes, and I remember a period where I would be mad. I didn't want the blinds open. I didn't want to see the sun come up in the morning. And I felt myself sinking back to the place that I have called myself out of. And then I said, you know what? But I stopped doing those things. So then you start meditating again. You start practicing, gratitude again, and gratitude for, someone lost their child. What are you talking about? Gratitude. But guess what? I have gratitude for the moments that we shared. I have gratitude for him coming in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what again, it's just mind blowing that you have come so far, and it was something that you had overcome. And
Yeah.
like you said, we want to wait for perfection in our life. Okay. And this is not just with something like this. This is how we live as human beings. We don't want to do things until the moment is right, until everything is perfect, until I get it all together. You're never going to have it all together. Okay. And as long as you're living on this planet, none of us are ever going to have it all together. I'm
Right.
40 years old now, and 49. Let me take it off. 49, and what happens is I'm constantly learning, and I was actually blown away the other day how much I'm still learning on a daily basis, as long as I allow myself to learn, because
Yeah.
that's a big step. We can't act as if we know it all, okay? Because then
Right.
learning, but the fact that you're still overcoming is proof that it's a continuing process, no matter what it is. It could be, like I said, it could be death, it could be divorce, it could be financial issues, it can be, something that you've gone through in your personal life. But the reason why I love this topic is because we can apply the principle of overcoming to many different areas, not just the loss of your child, but to many different areas of how it's possible to be an overcomer. And again, you are living it. I had a quick story was, you know me that I'm a single dad. So what happened was when it was over the summer and it was time for my daughter to go away. She was going away for a month, and the first time I went to the food store afterwards, after dropping her off at the airport, I realized I don't have to shop for her for this entire month, and that hit me, right. And I immediately grabbed a hold of that, and my thought went to you. My mind actually went to you and saying, Joe, I, what are you really like moaning about? Like, this could be something that's permanent, which it has become for many, many people throughout the world.
Oh my
And so,
gosh.
so your situation is touching people, okay? Just like it touched me that day to have that moment of gratitude, okay, that moment of gratefulness to realize how small my situation was at that point, even though it upset me because I'm like, okay, I'm not going to see my baby for another month. But then what happens is I think and I realize, wait a minute, wait a minute, Joe. Okay, you need to reel that in and realize how grateful you need to be, because there's people that will never be able to do something like that for their children again. So and if I hadn't heard your story, if you hadn't opened up to me about it, opened up to thousands of people about it, if you hadn't shared it, okay, I could have spent that entire moment being ungrateful,
Right.
ungrateful. And now when when we get done with this podcast, I'm just going to go kiss my baby, because
Yeah.
what you're saying is that When you said earlier on in this podcast about answering the call, okay, answering the phone call, answering the text message, it's the little things because we know not what tomorrow holds or the next for a moment for a situation like yours. So again, thank you so much, for opening up and being able to put your feelings aside just for a moment
Right.
to
And when you say that gratitude, it's the exact same situation I've gone through because I have another son, a living son, and I've met parents who've lost two kids. And so the same thing, like you're looking at it, your daughter, you still have her. And I look at it and I still have my son. I can sit up here and give up on life, but I still have my son, and this person is still fighting, and they've lost two children. There are people, one of the things is one of the first blog posts that I've written. I have a blog also. It's on the doitfordamani.com website. And one of them is called The Overcomers. It was the second blog that I published. And what I did was, actually, it was a lesson that I did when I was teaching. So a lot of the things that saved me are the things that I had my students doing. Remember, I said I've been teaching people about adversity. Now was a chance for me to practice and see if these things that I've said actually were beneficial.
Mm.
So, and it was my students who were reaching out to me, telling me, to, they needed me again. I did like, stop being silent. They need to know that I'm okay because I've always told them that you can make it through anything. So if I give up and if I stay closed off, then it's almost as if they would regress to what they've experienced because the person who told them that they could make it through those things is now giving up. So there was a project that I had them do called the Overcomers Project. Actually, that was the name of the project. And what they each had to do was research a person, famous person who they admired, who has overcome tremendous adversity. And the projects were phenomenal. Have someone presented about John Travolta and how his son had passed away, Keanu Reeves and how his fiance and his child had passed away. And I didn't know that about him. So when this happened to me, I said, let me set out to research other parents who've lost children and what they were able to do. And you wouldn't believe how many people, so many presidents who've lost children in the past. And you look at John Walsh and, losing Adam and what great things he went forward to do. Like America's Most Wanted would not be a thing had he not lost his child.
Yeah.
MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, would not be a thing had a mother not lost her child to drunk driving. Black Lives Matter would not, like the catalyst for that was Trayvon Martin being killed by Zimmerman, right? So, and then you look at Lucy Macbeth and losing her son Jordan Davis, and she went on, to do great things in politics. And I said, you know what? I'm going to look at these people. There are plenty of examples of people who give up, but there are plenty of examples of people who are overcomers.
Yeah.
And if they can overcome, if they can live with this, and if they can find meaning and purpose in life, then I can too.
Yeah, and there's something about that overcomer title, man. I got to tell you, being a speaker about overcoming adversity, and now somebody like you speaking to somebody like you, it carries a load because when you go through, okay, and now it's time for you to apply the things that you have told other people to apply. That's the true gut check right there. That is the true gut check, and I can tell you, I've been there multiple times. Just in 2020 alone, where I had to say, okay, Joe, you need to really, really practice what you preach here, and
Right.
when it's time for that gut check, that helps me to actually realize that okay, a lot of things are a lot easier said than done. Okay,
Right.
that's one thing I always want to get across to people before they start criticizing someone else because they may be depressed or criticizing someone when they say, "Oh, just get up out of your bed and just go outside." It's a lot of things that are so much easier said than done. And it's being that overcomer. That helps you build that empathy and helps you build sympathy in certain situations where you realize you really got to practice what you preach here. And when your students called you on it, okay, because you had been an overcomer speaker, you had been someone who has, someone who's been motivational and someone who's been inspiring, and they called you on it. It was time for you to have that gut check, and
Yeah.
that's the
And what I say when you said that thing about people saying just get up and get out of bed, and I think about how triggering those comments can be Now, having gone through this, and just, using motivational quotes as if that's the solve, that's going to solve someone's problems, or telling someone just pray. Like I'm telling people that I'm walking with faith, but to hear someone say, or, even if I'm looking at something, there was a kid last week who collapsed and had sudden cardiac arrest, just like my son did, but he survived. And I was grateful and happy because I posted the story and I'm asking for prayers. But then someone put in a comment on the page that the power of prayer, as if that's, why he was saved. And they didn't mean it like that. But then it thinks you think, well, why weren't my prayers, answered? And those split second things, but those simple things can be triggering to someone who's dealing with anxiety, dealing with grief, dealing with depression. Telling someone, my husband used to tell me, you need to go outside and get some sunshine. And I'm mad that the sun is shining. So don't just tell me I need to get up because the sun is shining. People who would post, I would see posts and it say, smile because you woke up this morning. Well, you don't know, last night I was praying for God not to let me wake up. So how is that helpful to me for you to tell me? And so then it makes me feel guilty that I can't find joy in the fact that I woke up this morning. So I'm not in that place anymore, but now having had to experience that, I am very careful with blanket motivational statements, because those statements that are said are very hard for someone who is struggling with finding hope. And the word hope, for a period of time, I called it the 4-letter word. It was a curse word to me. I didn't have hope for a long time. So there's so many things that just can make you implode, because the world around, we have this thing to where so many people who are dealing with things, but that's their mechanism, is to say, oh, well, God's got it. Well, we know he got it, but how does that make me feel better? So can we, as a community, how do we make sure that the things that we're saying, I think it's kind of like we don't know what to say sometimes. Some of these things people just don't know what to say. But just by me speaking up and saying, hey, these things, maybe say this, not that, be there, or you don't have to say anything, because even saying for me to do this, and that's going to make me feel better. Go out for a walk because it's going to make you feel better. Well, why don't you just ask me to go for a walk with you? Because don't say it as if that's going to make me miss my son any less, because it's not. And don't treat me as if you have the answer to fix me, because like a piece of me is broken and will always be different. I'm not broken, damaged broken, but I'm cracked like a mosaic, right? A piece of mosaic. Or, those vases, there's a vase that they say that it cracks and then they glue it back together with colored glue in between. And so now it has a different type of beauty. It's never going to be the same. So that's how I look at myself. I'm never going to be that same person, but I have evolved into something different through this pain that I've experienced, like a butterfly. It's not a caterpillar anymore. They're not the same thing. A butterfly is not a caterpillar with wings. A butterfly is a different being. Going through that process in the cocoon, the caterpillar basically melts itself down and becomes a new organism. And I feel like grief, pain, it has the ability to do that. So in that darkness, we can embrace the darkness, allow ourselves to trust the darkness, right? And come out being what it is that we were destined to become. A caterpillar was not destined to be a caterpillar forever. It was destined to become a butterfly. And that's a part of it, overcoming the process of living in the darkness of that cocoon.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the things I learned from being a hostage negotiator was sometimes just be. When you don't know what to say, sometimes it's just better not to say anything at all. And learning. This was actually one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, but you just covered it. Was what are some of the things that people shouldn't say? Because there are people listening to this podcast who really don't know, and they think that they're helping, and they mean well, and sometimes when we mean well, we may say certain things, and we've all had it happen to us, and we don't necessarily blame the person when they say the wrong
Right.
thing, especially when they're trying to help, but having this conversation with you actually helps more people understand and be more empathetic to understanding people's situations a little bit better, and just sometimes knowing what not to say. And sometimes,
A few things would be not to say God needed him more.
mm-hmm,
Okay. He's in a better place. Even some of the things that hold a little bit of truth aren't helpful and it's hurtful. So when people said to me early on that he's in a better place, at that time, I wanted to know why couldn't I be in that place? If it's a better place, why do I have to stay here? Right? People saying he wouldn't want you to be sad. Well, my response to that, I got angry when someone said that to me, and I said he would want to be here. How? What are you telling me? He wouldn't want me to be sad. He wouldn't want me to be going through this. So how do you know how he would want me to handle it? And really, I think everybody comes from a place of empathy. Everybody comes from a place of love. I know that for a fact because I know that I've said some things before it happened to me that now looking back, I'm like, oh, that wasn't the best thing to say, you know. But I think for me, speaking up and talking about grief, it's to let people know, just like you said, just be. You don't have to try to fix it. You don't have to try to take somebody's pain away. There's a really good book by David Kessler, and it's called Finding Meaning. And one of the chapters in it it talks about grief is meant to be witnessed, not fixed. So if you witness the person's grief, you're there with them. You are able to listen. You're able to sit there in those uncomfortable moments. Let them talk about their loved one. That's another thing that was a big thing. A lot of people wouldn't want to talk about him. They don't want to bring up his name. People think that it is painful to bring up the name, but for most people that I've talked to, our biggest fear is for people to stop talking about them. Our biggest fear is for people to forget them. So it brings us joy, even if we cry, even if it brings us tears, it brings us joy for us to hear them talked about, hear people share memories. But I went to a family gathering and I remember we were doing an activity and we were all talking about like our favorite movies and things like that. And I would bring up Damani's favorite movies or his favorite scenes. And people, soon as I would bring it up, everybody would look and change the subject. And it made me so mad. It was like you're ignoring or like his existence. And that's not what they meant to do. They love, present tense, love Damani. They love me. So they weren't trying to hurt me, but we're all learning together. So for me, it would be selfish of me to not speak up and tell people what is helpful, what's hurtful with dealing with people with grief, because it can help somebody else not have to feel that moment of, trigger, because someone knows, okay, let me not try to fix it, because by trying to fix the grief, now I'm making the person feel worse. I just need to be here and let them know, because it's kind of condescending. Like, how do you think you're going to fix and take away the pain that God gave me?
my understanding is that there's a difference between a heart attack and sudden cardiac arrest. That's my understanding of it. Again, I'm not a doctor on this show, but my understanding is that Damani died from sudden cardiac arrest. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, okay. Sudden cardiac arrest is when the heart suddenly stops. And some of us never really get an exact answer. And part of the problem with sudden cardiac arrest is that it's not mandated that that be listed as the cause of death on the death certificate. Damani's cause of death at 17 years old, healthy, looking just the way he did on that picture, the day that he passed, looking just the way he did on this picture, it was called natural causes. Natural causes. How does a 17-year-old pass away from natural causes? And so they have like that is the cause, and then they have the condition or whatever it's called, and it said hypertrophic. Ventricular hypertrophy. So his left ventricle was enlarged. And so that's how we knew it was related to the heart. And as I've studied sudden cardiac arrest, there's a lot of kids that die in their sleep, that go to sleep and don't wake up. And people don't speak up about it. People don't know, like, because it's being called natural causes, but your child's heart stopped in the middle of the night. That needs to be investigated. So people don't even know that there's genetic testing that can be done post-mortem. So right now we're in the process of getting genetic testing post-mortem for Damani. But if the coroner is not offering that to someone, they're not hearing about sudden cardiac arrest. So then after a period of time, the samples are gone and they don't know that they could have gotten that testing done. So what happened with Damani, his heart was enlarged. We're waiting to find out more, but 7,000 kids every year, youth, 25 and under, from over one, so that it's not SIDS, but from 1 to 25, 7,000 youth die every year from sudden cardiac arrest. Not, you know, an explanation, having a clear explanation, not having symptoms. Some people have symptoms, some people have conditions. Some of those 7,000 have heart conditions, but many of them don't. Many of them never had a symptom, or they had a symptom and it was not known that it could have led to death. So for instance, I have a group right now and it's over 100 parents in my Facebook group who've all lost their children to sudden cardiac arrest. And a few of them, more than a handful, had their child had fainted previously, like a year, 2 years before their death. But they took them to the doctor. The doctor checked them out, said that they were dehydrated or overheated or something like that, and never did a full heart screening. And some of them did get EKGs when they took them to like the emergency room after they fainted, but they were all cleared and none of them were told that they should get follow-up to make sure that it wasn't a heart condition. And several of those kids in those situations passed away 1 to 2 years after their faint. So that faint was a symptom, but they didn't recognize it as a symptom at that time. Damani had never fainted before. That was one of my questions to God, was like, why wouldn't you let him faint? Why wouldn't you let him, give me a red flag? But sudden cardiac arrest, the sudden stopping of the heart, or it turns into a quiver, right? It's not beating anymore and it's quivering. And it needs an AED shock in order for it to restart the heart. And that AED shock needs to happen within the first few minutes. Sometimes in the first few minutes, they get a shock and the heart still does not restart. It does not revive them. But the only cases that do survive get that AED shock within the first few minutes and get CPR within the first few minutes. But even if you get CPR for an extended period of time, without that AED, the heart is never going to restart. So the chances decrease every minute that you delay getting CPR and that you delay using an AED. Now, a heart attack, you have more symptoms and it's not a sudden stoppage of the heart, right? So you get sharp pain or, other symptoms, numbness and things like that, chest pain, some feelings in your arm. They say you can take an aspirin, you still need 911 called immediately, but usually with a heart attack, they're not needing CPR right away, right? Sometimes they do, but usually it's, a blockage, it's an artery. So they say there's a graphic that shows plumbing. So if you think about a heart attack, it's more of a plumbing issue. You think about sudden cardiac arrest, it's more of an electrical issue. So the heart has electrical rhythms, and for some reason there's a misfire, which can be an arrhythmia, or it can be a structural issue, but for some reason a heart is no longer able to pump properly and it stops or quivers. And so there's no blood flow going to the organs and to the brain, and that's sudden cardiac arrest. It happens to 350,000 people every year. It's really 356,000 people every year die from sudden cardiac arrest. That includes adults that are not heart attacks. So people who are 50 years old, 40 years old, who suddenly pass out. Sometimes they'll say it was a heart attack. So last week there was another one. There was a former NFL player who was 28 years old and he passed away last week, and they listed it in the article, heart attack. And when I shared the article, I said, not a heart attack. Because the way that you hear what happens, if he just suddenly collapsed, then it's usually not going to be a heart attack. But in the media, that's the only language we use when you'll hear them say a 17-year-old had a heart attack. That 17-year-old did not have a heart attack. That 17-year-old had sudden cardiac arrest. So we need to be more clear with the language so that people can understand that this is a real thing. It is a real risk. More kids die from sudden cardiac arrest than die from childhood cancer, than die from breast cancer. If you look at the sudden cardiac arrest as a whole, more people die from sudden cardiac arrest every year than die from cancer. But we have more awareness for cancer because someone spoke up, because organizations spoke up and made it a thing. So that's why I share about sudden cardiac arrest, because I think back and I And this really helped me start sharing, because I met a parent whose child passed away 3 days after Damani. She's in my group. Another parent whose child passed away 2 weeks after Damani. Another one whose child passed away a month after Damani. And then I think about all the ones that passed away before Damani, and if those could have saved Damani, and if Damani's could have saved those other ones. But with us not having enough awareness in the public eye about sudden cardiac arrest, then we don't know that this is a thing. And there are preventative measures that can take place. Testing, EKG testing needs to be repeated. It doesn't need to just happen once. Damani had it once. He had it when he was in 8th grade, but he was a junior when he passed away. So that's 3 years. Now I see that the recommendation is that EKG is repeated every 2 years, because the heart grows. It's a muscle, and it changes as the body changes. As long as they're growing and changing, they should continue to get repeat EKGs. But also, I thought an EKG was like a one and done. I thought that if he had a clear EKG, then everything was good. And he had it routinely. He didn't have any symptoms or anything, because in our school district here, they do it for every incoming freshman. So I just thought it was okay, he's good. But then, an echocardiogram would also be good for him, because the EKG only captures what's happening in real time in that moment. So if your heart is not having an arrhythmia when that EKG is performed, like, so somebody might have chest pains and they get an EKG. And so like with me, after Damani passed, I probably had some form of broken heart syndrome. So I had an EKG, and my doctor told me that it was all out of whack. It was reading saying that I was either having a heart attack or had a heart attack. And so she referred me to the cardiologist. I went to the cardiologist. My appointment was 2 weeks later. My EKG was normal. So the EKG only captures what's happening in real time. The echocardiogram captures the structure of the heart. It's a more comprehensive picture of what's happening. There are other things, like, so some people have a pre-existing condition. It can be an arrhythmia. It can be electrolyte imbalances or anything like that. But then also it could be that someone had a virus and it's set into their heart. So right now, myocarditis is tied to some of the deaths that are happening to people after they recover from COVID. So sudden cardiac arrest has increased more than 50% at this time last year due to COVID. So people who've experienced COVID are having sudden cardiac arrest like up to 4 or 5 months after they've been diagnosed with COVID and recovered, because there's a virus, and sometimes the myocarditis sets into the heart. Sometimes you feel it, sometimes you dismiss it because you don't understand that that's a symptom. So the kid last week from University of Florida, they haven't like given the official cause, but he had COVID in July. And so this is about 4 months after he had COVID. It's within that window, and he had sudden cardiac arrest. I just shared that video on my Facebook page, and it actually showed the collapse, and it broke my heart to see it. But it's happening. It's something that people need to be aware of, know that they can get the testing. If you are feeling chest pain, shortness of breath, dizziness, lightheadedness, let's not brush it off. Let's not think, because we have this kind of invincibility, or we think that we're strong and we don't have to worry about it. And I was that type of person too. My son never really got sick. So what worry is there? But now I'm seeing people. There was another person I met. Her son passed away this summer in July. He was a cross country runner. He went to practice. He was feeling dizzy and lightheaded at practice, so he didn't finish practicing. He came home. She scheduled him a doctor's appointment. It was going to be 2 days later, but he felt better and he wanted to go for a run. Why wouldn't she let him go for a run if she doesn't know about sudden cardiac arrest? So she let him go for a run. She was out with him on the run, and she saw him collapse in front of her face. And she works in the hospital setting as like a nurse's aide or a surgical tech or something like that. And she still was oblivious. I was a coach, and I was oblivious that this could happen outside of physical activity. This could happen without signs and symptoms. What they teach us in our coaching training does not cover all of the bases when it comes to sudden cardiac arrest. So people just need to know, get regular screenings. And if you are diagnosed with a condition, it's not the end of the world. It's not a death sentence. There are things that can be done to save these children. You know, they can get, I have several families that I've interviewed and they've had open heart surgery and are back playing sports, or some of them get on medication. Some of the conditions, like if they have long QT syndrome, then they probably can't play sports anymore, but they get to live. And I would much rather have my son here living um, than holding on to his physical absence, but trying to keep him close to my heart.
You know, again, just a heart-wrenching story, and God is truly using you. Thank you for stepping in and doing what you're doing. Okay, just the information that you've given, you know, the listeners today, I'm sure has enlightened just tons. Okay, tons of listeners, and that's just something that goes back to what we were saying earlier about how you are stepping into your purpose. Okay, to get this done and putting your pain aside, even if it's just a little bit, just to help somebody else. So, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for everything that you've shared with us today. Where can the people find you right now if they have any questions of your website, you know, your YouTube channel? Where can they find you right now?
All right, people can find, first of all, to find out more about Damani and the organization and what we do, we give out, we go out and we do CPR training. We talk about sudden cardiac arrest in the month of October for Sudden Cardiac Arrest Awareness Month. We train 900 youth in how to do CPR and respond in a sudden cardiac arrest situation. So they can go to DamaniGibsonFoundation.org or doitfordamani.com and learn more about what we're doing. We have awareness videos about sudden cardiac arrest and what you can do, the signs and symptoms, and also what it appears to look like. That sometimes it looks like a kid is falling asleep. Sometimes it looks like a seizure. So being aware of those things. And then also for myself, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Ruqayya Gibson. And my YouTube channel is Ruqayya Gibson. On the Ruqayya Gibson YouTube channel, I have videos that deal with sudden cardiac arrest, that deal with grief and loss, that deal with overcoming adversity, and that deal with, you know, sports and, you know, finding how to push using sports analogies and how athletes are looked at and seen as these strong creatures, but how they also have to overcome adversity as well. So visit me on any of those, and also my blog. Anybody that's dealing with grief, dealing with anxiety, dealing with adversity, I'm very transparent. I share how I feel. I take off my mask so that in my truth, there can be healing for someone else. Because I said that I don't have to suffer. I'm not going to live a life of suffering. And even if I have suffered, I'm still going to serve.
Thank you, Ruqayya. Again, thank you. There you have it, folks. There you have it. Another amazing story of someone overcoming their adversity, but it's still a constant battle every day. Okay, you're never going to be 100% over something like this, but with the right training, with the right listening, with surrounding yourself with the right people, joining the right groups, and you know, getting involved with the right people and surrounding yourself with good individuals, I promise you that you too can overcome. And thank you again for joining JH Overcomes podcast. And listen, continue to follow. Go like it, share it. You know, you can find us on Spotify. You can find us on iHeart. You can find us on iTunes, and you can also listen. Just what I want you guys to do is remember. Okay, leave a comment. Okay, leave a like, share it. Is it good for the podcast? Yes, it's good for the podcast. Okay, the sponsors like that. They like when we get things like that. But more importantly, it's good for helping other people. All right. Until we meet again, I will see you when I see you. I'm your boy JH Overcomes. All right. Peace.